What's going on, guys, and welcome back to the channel. I'm Chris, this is 4K Motoring, and today's the day I've been waiting for quite a while. We ordered the Acra system full exhaust for our 2022 Ducati Multistrada back in early December. It is now mid-February and it has finally arrived. The shipping was pretty quick from the seller, but it did take a while to get shipped. This is an eBay seller that I know a lot of people have used before, that I've heard a lot of you guys have used, and they have really good reviews other than the shipping speed. They have some of the best prices out there, and that's kind of what it is. You just take what you can get, I guess. We do finally have it. It is here in the box. We'll go ahead and take that out. I want to do a couple tests on the Multistrada first. I want to make sure we have a good sound level test before and after. Make sure we have some consistent ways to measure volume. I know it doesn't come through the videos very well, but I want to make it as consistent for you guys so you know exactly what to expect. I do have a decibel meter so you can kind of get an idea of how much overall louder it is. We want to go ahead and get some fuel economy numbers just to see before and after if it makes any difference. And I do want to go ahead and make note of some of these specialized things that Ducati says about installing this exhaust system, specifically what's required of you for this bike to have the dealer download the fuel map and what the new maintenance schedule is that's required on this bike in order to keep your warranty. If you didn't know, a lot of people don't talk about, when you switch this exhaust system, you have to sign a form. Your oil change intervals go down to 5,000 miles instead of 9,000. There's a couple of other little things that change, but they basically treat this more as a racing bike than a street bike now. So there are some changes that go through with the actual warranty itself for this bike with this exhaust system. What I want to do is get a good sound level estimate and kind of a good idea of the tone of the factory exhaust. I know I've done that before. I have a video for you guys. I'll link up above when I tested whether this muffler itself did anything. I think that catalytic converter is where all the noise is being basically tamed from. For consistency, I do have the little loop for my extra travel bag here on the seat. I'm going to mount the microphone that I'm using right to it. That way it gives us a pretty good perch. It's not right in the path of the wind coming off this muffler, but it is close enough that it should give you a pretty accurate apples to apples comparison of noise. I do have our decibel meter here, and this will measure in real time, and I can also set it to record a peak or max volume. And as I'm talking, you'll see where it kind of sticks, and that'll be our max. I've done that before on this bike, and I know right about 110 decibels is the max I've gotten out of this factory exhaust. But I'm just going to keep it on real time just so we can watch through the rev range what the actual sound output is. So you guys saw that for yourself. 113 decibels is our peak. We were kind of around 86 to 90 decibels at idle. A little bit under 90 decibels was kind of where we were at idle. And you guys heard the tone best I could recreate. Again, through my microphone and through your speakers, it's never going to be totally accurate to real life. But at least being as consistent as I can, putting the same microphone in the same place, you should get a pretty good idea of the differences. We'll do another sound test and loop once the exhaust is on without the tune done. And then we'll go ahead, our Ducati's about due for service anyway, so we'll probably take it out there and have them download the map and do the 9,000 mile yearly service on it. We'll go ahead afterwards, do that same MPG loop, get the same sound test in the same location, just to give you the most apples to apples comparison that I possibly can. All right, let's go ahead and cut this tape. Again, Amana Racing is the eBay seller that I've used and that several of y'all have used to get these exhausts. I'll definitely leave a link to them below. I don't have any sort of affiliation with them, but I'll leave a link so you guys can find them and see their prices. They're definitely gonna beat most of the dealerships that you can find here in the US, and that's for sure. The box overall is in very great shape. It does say Ducati, it does say Ducati Performance Akrapovic, and on the label here, it does show us that it is for the Ducati Multistrada V4 21 and up. In the box, it does come with some instructions to explain what everything is. Has removal of the original components. This is a complete, very detailed workbook on exactly how to install this exhaust system if you're concerned about doing it at home. We're going to go ahead and start disassembling. This is probably the easiest part because you're just taking stuff off. It's always easier to take them off than it is to put it back on. Okay, we're going to start by removing our skid plate here. We're going to need a 4mm with an extension to remove this top bolt right up here. And then we're going to need a 6mm hex to go in the bottom bracket. There is one tube, a little grommet that's got to come out here, and then there's a small tube holder on the back that's holding some of those vent tubes that do have to be removed as well. We're going to go ahead and start removing the full muffler on the rear. These are again going to be a 4mm. In reading the instructions, make sure you save these parts, don't destroy them, because some of them are reused. When possible, I do like to put the fasteners back in where they came out of and put a little piece of tape over them. That way I know exactly what fasteners came out of what position. Okay, under here is a bolt that we're going to have to loosen to release this clamp. It's going to be a 13mm, which is kind of odd, right up there. We're going to have this one bolt right here is a 6mm, and that should get our muffler off the bike. So this has a 12mm nut on the back. Here just takes a little bit of wiggling and it worms its way out. Here's our factory muffler. It's only a little bit heavier than our new muffler is, but I don't think most of the weight savings come from the muffler. I think it's all this big catalytic converter with all these metals in it. You guys probably remember when I did this last time, it didn't make much difference at all when I removed just the muffler. It was a very, very subtle difference. Maybe a slight volume change, and that's about it. No real tone change. Any slip-on you get is only going to be able to modify the final output, basically noise. It doesn't do a whole lot for you. Under load and heavy acceleration, you might notice a small change, but really it's not worth spending a lot of money on a slip-on, especially on these bikes with the catalytic converters, because it does nothing. All right, we're going to take off this right side heel guard. We're actually going to remove it on both sides. It's going to take a 5mm. Okay, this heel guard took two 5mm bolts to come out, and the top one was a little bit difficult to remove because it had to be kind of snaked around the brake lever. I ended up with a 6mm taking this bolt out right here just so I can kind of drop this whole lever down just a bit. Be careful, there's a lot of tension on this spring, so you don't want to get something out of position, but once you do it, it's pretty easy to kind of move forward. Next, the instructions are telling us to remove this exhaust mounting flange right here by removing that one bolt. Let's see, that is again a 4mm, and this is securing the catalytic converter to this foot plate bracket. That's why we're removing it. We probably will be reusing it. So this is the part, set it aside. We now see we're working on disassembling the catalytic converter from all its mounting points. Now the center stand needs removed because we're removing this plate, and honestly I'm not sure if we need to remove the entire thing or just the one side. I think we can probably get by with just removing this one bolt, but the spring is going to kind of have to come off anyway. This is a pretty big screw, and there is a circle clip on the back of it. We have the bike supported by our rear stand here on our spools. That way we can take off the center stand without problem. If you don't have a set of these pliers that are great for removing these circle clips, you're going to need some. There is nothing that matches these pliers for getting these little clips off. This is a set by Fast Pro. It's pretty cheap on Amazon. I'll leave a link to those down below. Highly recommend. All right, next we're going to move this cover piece right here. We're going to start seeing what we can take off, get out of the way without totally taking off this center stand, because that's a total pain. We're going to go ahead and pull this little plug off right here and get to the bolts behind it. It's a gigantic 12 millimeter. Okay, that pulls this whole cover off. It's worth noting that is just a big, almost plastic feeling screw. It's just a cover. So we can get now these two bolts off. These are going to be 12 millimeter bolts, two of them, back to back here. So the center stand was a little tricky to get off. Those pliers I showed you, definitely necessary. A decent breaker bar and an 8 millimeter socket will help you. What I found and what I'm trying is the right side of the bike is the one that has the center stand and has that big spring on it. I didn't want to remove this if we didn't have to. Turns out, if you just remove the left side of the bike, this bolt on the left-hand side of the bike, if you're able to remove that, you can keep this right-hand side on. As long as you remove that back pin, it can slide a little bit. And this whole piece is allowed to slide out of the way just like we wanted, so we can access the exhaust clamps inside. So you don't have to worry about this spring necessarily. So we do have our exhaust clamp right in there, and another one right down here to hold the catalytic converter on. They're both going to be a 13 millimeter. And this one, there's a lot of clearance issues. What I found is that a ratcheting wrench with one of these little attachments on the end is perfect to get in there. A regular ratchet will probably work as well, with pretty much no extension, because there's not a lot of clearance in here. It is very tight fit. Next, we're going to move the 3 bolts holding each of these headers on. They're going to be 8 millimeter bolts. They should come off pretty easy. That'll allow the front headers to slide. Our O2 sensor is in this collector, so we're going to save that. The catalytic converter is going to slide forward then to come off this rear pipe up there. And I think that'll be all we need to remove the factory exhaust. Most importantly, these are all going to be reused. Don't strip anything. Be very careful. Okay, we've got all our bolts out. We've got the back end loosened. We do have, be very careful. You're going to have your gaskets that come out. As soon as they come out, go ahead and remove them without bending them. For reference, this open spot goes towards the top. It is very easy to see what direction they go in. Just kind of keep in mind the direction they come out. Now, there were issues in some of the early ones of these with some cracking around the welds. I think all that's been taken care of. Just kind of keep that in mind. We do have our O2 sensor still plugged in, and there's our catalytic converter. This is heavy. I have no doubt this thing is where all of our weight savings is coming from. This thing is absolutely heavy. This single piece weighs more than the entire new exhaust system does, without a doubt. We have completed the disassembly stage. We've got catalytic converter, front headers, all the exhaust off. We can see the rear headers. We didn't have to do anything with those. They're still intact. See the space under the bike. We've got this whole side off on the right-hand side of the bike. But on the left-hand side, you can see we just took that screw out of the center stand, and that allowed us to do this. We don't have to mess with this spring. It can stay intact, and it's going to make our life a whole lot easier. These instructions have been pretty fantastic. They've really very well explained for the at-home mechanic or shop mechanic how to do this. We're going to go ahead and put the new exhaust on, and I'm really excited to hear how this thing sounds. Well, after a little bit of frustration, we do have this exhaust system done. The instructions that came with this kit are very detailed and very good. They contain torque specs for every piece. They're very good about telling exactly what you need to do, both in written description and in photo, so I really do like that. The problem I've had, and really the only problem I've had this whole time, is regarding the center stand. So I was able to make it work with keeping the spring attached on this side here and keeping this bolt in. Now my problem is, what I did on both bolts for them to slide was that I took this little pin off, took that off, and that's what keeps this bolt basically from backing out, that and the Loctite on it. I'm not able to get those back on. There is so little clearance here between this collector and the center stand mounts on both sides, I can't get that back on. I don't have enough clearance to snap that back on. I don't know if I missed a step or it was doable some other point. I don't think it was. So I think it's just going to be something that I have to watch these bolts to make sure they don't back out. Keep an eye on them, make sure the Loctite is good, and make sure they're seated in the actual center stand. Otherwise, they should be fine. Everything else lined up pretty well. The torque specs, like I said, are all good. It has a different heel protector right there. Has its own protector. As you can see, we have the 2 pipes coming up now to the Akrapovic exhaust with that carbon fiber silencer on the end. We have everything hooked together. It doesn't require a lot of torque on a lot of these. If you're doing it hand tight to even be snug, you're probably over torquing a lot of these fasteners. So what I have not done yet is start the bike. We have everything put together, best I can tell. I've reread the instructions. I've looked around the bike, and I think everything is put back together the way we wanted it. So I wanted to bring you guys along with me for the first start as we bring this bike to life. I imagine there's probably going to be a little bit of smoke and some of the oil coatings, some of that stuff will wear off right when it first starts. I know there's some styrofoam in there. But overall, I'm very curious to see how this sounds. So let's get it started. And just like I did before, the microphone is right here on that extra bag mount, right above the exhaust. Same spot, not directly in the wind path, but right on the outside of it. I do have my decibel meter here, ready to go. As you can see where I'm talking, this is the decibel reading I'm getting for just speech. You guys can compare that to, if you're using your own decibel meter, kind of where that sits, just to get an idea of how this exhaust sounds. So without further ado, let's go ahead and give this a first start. This is not tuned, this is just the exhaust installed. So if you guys can hear me over this bike, the bass is definitely much stronger. This is a much cleaner sound. I am very impressed. All in all, that is a pretty wicked new noise. It is a much more aggressive, much more befitting of this monster of a bike that is the Multistrada V4. We can see the peak decibels that we reached, not dramatically higher than they were before. The idle decibels are definitely higher than they were before. So you're getting an idle that's close to the full rev decibel of the stock exhaust, and the bass and just the throatiness is far exceeding what the factory exhaust could provide us. The induction noise I noticed with the factory exhaust was very prominent and sounded good, especially under high load, high acceleration. I think this exhaust is going to outshine that induction noise, and that's pretty phenomenal. So like I said, I'm going to spend a day or two, make sure that this is broken in, get some good fuel economy figures for you guys, and some overall impressions with just the exhaust before I get the tune. That way we can separate what the actual tune provides and what the exhaust itself does. Let's see how it goes. So we've had the opportunity now to ride this bike with the exhaust system put on, both before I got the tune done and after the Evo mapping. Wow, this is an incredible exhaust that, in my opinion, should have come with the bike at the factory since new. I get all the emissions requirements with both noise and particles, I get it, but this is the way this bike should sound. I've got a couple takeaways overall from this exhaust system. First, I'll say the noise and just the riding experience with just the exhaust without getting the tune done was phenomenal. I would be shocked if you told me there was no power gains whatsoever from just the exhaust from the bike computer just kind of correcting itself. I'd be shocked if he told me that, because it really felt like there was more to it, and that noise was incredible. When it comes to fuel mileage, this is where it kind of got interesting. I can't control myself when I hear this noise, and I think that's probably the case for most people that get the upgraded exhaust. We want to hear the bike, and that changes the character of the bike itself. It makes the whole bike have a little bit more personality, and I've noticed I'm just getting on that throttle more and more just to hear that noise. Accordingly, the fuel mileage has suffered. On straight cruise control, when the bike is just cruising on its own, I really don't see much difference at all. But when you get on it and when you ride it the way you want to ride it, that exhaust is going to bait you into using a whole lot more fuel. So I'll leave some numbers here on the screen for you. Kind of what I noticed before I got the exhaust done, just on the factory spec, is the highest I've ever gotten is about 42 miles per gallon on a highway trip with this bike. I kind of averaged in that 36 to 38 range from combined driving. That was my normal. And if I was riding really aggressive for a tank, I might be closer to that 33, 34 range, something like that. That was kind of my overall stock bike fuel mileage numbers that I accumulated over the last 8,000 miles or so. Now, in the couple hundred miles I did before I got the tune done, I noticed those numbers dropped. I ended up riding more aggressively more often, and I was more around 32 to 33 miles per gallon more often than not. Obviously not counting just highway runs. The highway runs, I really didn't see much difference when I was on cruise control, just cruising down the interstate. That remained about the same, but anytime I was on the throttle myself, the mileage just dove down to that low number, and I lost, I want to say, about a mile per gallon. I don't know if it was riding style or just the bike in general. When I got the tune done, I noticed that there's definitely more power in that mid-range and top end than there was before. I don't really notice a whole lot more grunt down below, but it is a noticeable amount of power, I will say that. The tune, they say, is about 5 horsepower and 8 foot-pounds of torque to the wheel, and then about 11 pounds taken off the bike in general. So that's enough to feel. I'm guessing at the motor, at the crank, we're pushing somewhere around 180 horsepower, maybe close to that 105 foot-pounds of torque number from the actual crank of the motor itself with this tune and exhaust done. And that's a rocket for an adventure bike. That is absolutely unnecessary, and the whole package is pretty phenomenal. I also, as you guys saw, I put that Michelin Road 6 rear tire on just because of an issue I had in between this test, which did skew some of the numbers. The overall feedback I had from that tire and grip, acceleration, all that has been much improved from the Pirellis that came on factory. Obviously, this is a more road biased tire. It's less meant for doing kind of combination roads, but for the street driving that I've been doing with this bike so far, it has been a far superior tire. So I really got two questions that I really want to answer here. Once we've completed the full installation of this exhaust from electronics and hardware, two real questions. One, is it worth it? And man, let me tell you, the noise that this thing makes alone is phenomenal. I would have paid a good bit of money for that noise. I think it's the way Ducati should have come. Obviously, emission stuff where it is. I would have paid a good amount of money just for that noise, because I think that is really what I wanted. Gives this bike a little bit more personality that was missing that I had with my old Multistrada, and it makes me fall in love with it just a little bit more. Is it worth the money I paid? That's really the question. Is it worth that high price tag? And here's what I can tell you, at least from my thoughts on that issue. The exhaust I got this all done for under $3,000. Between the eBay seller that I used and getting it just in for the tune at the local Ducati shop, I'm in about $2,800 for this exhaust. That's it. And I say that's it, but that's still a high price for a little or two that doesn't even include new headers. I mean, it's literally just from the collector back, new exhaust and a tune. That's a lot of money. What I think I might have been able to do, I think QD is the company that makes a catless B-pipe. So removing the catalytic converter that was on this bike, replacing it with just a bent piece of pipe that interfaces with the front and rear collector. So you get rid of that. You get all the noise reduction that that catalytic converter was doing, you get rid of that, and you could run it out to whatever muffler you wanted. Even the factory muffler might have been actually pretty good if the noise wasn't going through that catalytic converter first. And that runs just under $1,000. So if you're after the noise, and I think the noise is probably the best part of this whole kit. Do I think you need more power than comes with this from the factory? No, I really don't. Is it nice? Yeah, we all like more. We bought the Ducati for a reason, right? We wanted more power. But I think it has a pretty good amount from the factory. If we can get that noise from it for under $1,000, that may be the best bang for the buck you can get. I'd love to hear from somebody out there that's gotten just the QD catless B-pipe, and I'll link that down below, again, for under $1,000 and installed that, just to see if it really makes any difference. All your sensors, you only have the O2 sensors on the collectors upstream. There's no butterfly valve servo in the rear. So there's no errors thrown when you put the new exhaust on or change out the catalytic converter. So I think you really could get away with just spending that little bit amount of money and getting a much greater sound out of this bike. Hope you guys have enjoyed this video. I know I was pretty detailed when I was taking the bike apart because I think that was the most difficult portion. I didn't show a whole lot when I was putting the new exhaust on, as that kind of repeated the same steps backwards, and the instructions that came with this kit are very good. They are very detailed, they show all the torque specs, they're very specific on exactly what you do. It's really hard to mess up with the instruction booklet included with this kit. Overall, the noise is just about perfect. It is exactly what I wanted out of this bike. It is not overwhelming by any means when you're cruising on the highway, doing some long stints, but it is phenomenal down around town when you're accelerating under high load. So guys, that's my thoughts. That's my overall impression with the new exhaust on the Multistrada V4. It has been a phenomenal experience and I love this bike even more now. If you guys have any questions about it or want me to cover anything very specific about it, let me know. If you have any other mods that you want to see done just to see if it's worth spending the money, let me know and I'll see if I can make that happen for you. Otherwise, we are getting ready to go down to MotoGP in Austin, Texas here with less than a month remaining. I think it's going to be a pretty exciting adventure and I hope to bring you guys along with me. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and like this video, and we'll be back with you soon.